Good afternoon. Again, I'm Deanna Kitamura, and I lead the Voting Rights Project at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus. Asian Law Caucus is the nation's first Asian American legal and civil rights organization. Pedro Hernandez and I are part of a statewide coalition called the California Language Access Work Group. We recently released a report that includes a roadmap for language access in California, and we have copies for you. Now, I want to focus on a handful of points today. The first is the need for language assistance for many Asian American voters. Asian Americans make up nearly 14% of adult citizens in California. We are the fastest growing racial group in the state. Among U.S. citizens in California, about 32% of Asian Americans speak English less than very well. Now, that number varies when you look at the different Asian ethnic groups. The highest limited English proficiency rate is among Vietnamese Americans at 52%. Cambodian, Chinese, Korean, and Hmong limited English proficiency rates range between 37 and 40%. There's clearly a need for language assistance. Currently, there are federal and state requirements to provide language assistance when language groups hit different population thresholds. Under federal law, when a community reaches what is a relatively high county threshold, the county is obligated to provide comprehensive language assistance. That means they need to provide translated election materials, they need to have bilingual poll workers, and they need to do in-language outreach. Now, under state law, we have a much lower threshold that's targeted at the precinct level, but it is not comprehensive in terms of the assistance that is provided. Voters get a translated sample ballot. It is not votable. It's just a reference. Some counties do an excellent job going beyond what's required by law. They either do this by voluntarily covering additional languages or providing votable translated ballots. For example, LA County, we heard from Dean Logan, LA County provides additional languages. They provide votable ballots for all their covered languages, and they have them available for all their voters. In other words, the access to the translated ballots is not limited to voters living in a specific precinct. And that makes sense because vote centers are not precinct-based. Now, you may be wondering, how does language access relate to today's topic of voter turnout and participation? When San Diego started providing comprehensive language services under federal law, voter registration rose by more than 20% for Filipino Americans and by almost 40% for Vietnamese Americans. And the benefits have been confirmed by a national study. In 2015, Professors Fraga and Merseth published a study, and I'm not going to go into the details, but the bottom line is that where they have comprehensive language assistance, they saw voter registration by increase in the Latino community by 15%, and voter turnout increased by about 15 to 18% in Asian American communities. So there's a link between language assistance and higher turnout. We're co-sponsors of AB 884, authored by Assembly Members Lowe and Cervantes, and if it passes, it would provide comprehensive language assistance in more languages for the large language groups in California and translated votable ballots for smaller groups. We believe this will improve turnout and the voting experience. Now, the last point I want to make is a point that others have made, and that is the need for outreach and education. And what I want to stress is that outreach and education should be in languages used by voters. My organization has a sister affiliate in Los Angeles, and I worked at that affiliate for almost a decade. And I had colleagues at that time that ran a Get Out the Vote project, and that was targeting Asian American low propensity voters. My colleagues partnered with community-based organizations and volunteers, and they made calls in over a dozen languages. And sometimes the voters would say that was the very first time anyone ever reached out to them regarding any election issue. And my colleague, I don't remember the statistics, but my colleagues would tell me that they did see an increase in voter turnout among the people that they reached out to. So the lesson is that when campaigns are only reaching out to high propensity voters and only in English, it's really up to the counties and up to community groups to do the outreach to others. The California Language Access Workgroup that I mentioned held listening sessions in 6 languages, and we heard from participants a real desire for more information in terms of the voting process and what was on the ballots. And so I'm going to end by just saying that counties and community groups need funding to be able to conduct robust outreach to disenfranchised groups, including in-language outreach to voters who speak other languages. It makes a difference when we reach voters where they're at.